If you are scared an avoidant will leave, I want to give you a truth that changes your entire strategy in one sentence. The avoidant's worst fear is not losing you. Their worst fear is what happens if they keep you. That is why you can feel so much chemistry, so much intensity, so much eye contact, so much unspoken emotion, and still watch them disappear the moment the connection becomes real. Because when closeness rises, their nervous system does not interpret it as comfort. It interprets it as obligation, exposure, and a loss of control. And the reason this matters is simple. If you keep trying to win them by proving love, explaining feelings, and increasing pursuit, you are feeding the very fear that makes them run. If you want an avoidant back, the game is not convincing. The game is changing the conditions their system responds to, so closeness stops feeling like a trap and starts feeling like a choice. Let's get precise. When most people say losing you, they picture abandonment. They picture being replaced. They picture regret. But for many avoidants, abandonment is painful, yes, but it is familiar pain. They have survived it before emotionally. What they are not built to tolerate is the feeling of being pulled into someone else's emotional gravity, where they are expected to perform closeness on demand, explain themselves, soothe you, and stay consistently present when their system is wired to regulate through distance. So the fear is not you leaving. The fear is being trapped in a role where they cannot breathe, where they cannot retreat, where they cannot reset, and where their autonomy is constantly under negotiation. That is why, in avoidant dynamics, the moment you start acting like the relationship is official in your tone, your frequency, your expectations, your emotional intensity, they can suddenly go cold. Not because they stopped caring, because caring activates the danger. And the danger is this internal sentence their body learned a long time ago. If I get too close, I will lose myself. If I get too close, someone will need something from me that I cannot sustainably give. If I get too close, I will fail. If I fail, I will be blamed. If I am blamed, I will be shamed. So they back away before the shame can arrive. That is the pattern you are fighting. And if you want them back, you have to stop fighting the pattern like it is personal betrayal and start treating it like a predictable nervous system program. Because once you see the program, you can stop feeding it. And you can start using a smarter approach that creates return without chasing. Here is the most important distinction. Avoidants do not bond through pressure. They bond through safety plus freedom. Safety means you are not humiliating them for being slow to open. Freedom means your closeness does not come with a hidden contract. Most people do the opposite. They offer closeness with a contract. They do not say it out loud, but the contract is felt. If I give you intimacy, you owe me consistency. If I give you patience, you owe me reassurance. If I stay calm, you owe me clarity. And this is where things get brutal. That contract is reasonable in secure love. But in an avoidance system, it feels like a trap. So they instinctively reject the whole thing. Not because the relationship is bad, but because the relationship triggers the old fear of obligation. And the more you try to make the contract explicit, the more they pull away. So what do? You stop trying to negotiate the contract with words. You start creating an environment where the contract becomes unnecessary because behavior becomes obvious. This is the part most people miss. You do not get an avoidant back by making them understand. You get them back by making closeness feel low pressure and high clarity at the same time. Low pressure means you stop flooding. High clarity means you stop accepting crumbs. That combination is rare. That combination is what makes an avoidant system stop and think. Because they're used to two types of people: people who chase and demand, which triggers their fear, and people who disappear and punish, which triggers their shame and defensiveness. But when you become calm and firm, you become the third thing. You become safe without being easy. You become warm without being needy. You become present without being available on demand. And that is where their nervous system can finally re-enter the connection without panic. Now let's talk about the worst fear in a way that helps you. The worst fear is not losing you. It is being responsible for your emotional state. This is why long emotional texts are so dangerous in avoidant dynamics. Not because feelings are wrong, because avoidants translate big emotion into assignment. When you send a long message explaining your pain, asking them to see you, asking them to confirm, asking them to reassure, what they feel is not intimacy. They feel demand. They feel that you are handing them a job, and if they fail the job, they will be the villain. They would rather withdraw than risk failing. That is why you can pour your heart out and get silence. The silence is not always cruelty. It is avoidance of the role. And if you want them back, you stop giving them roles they cannot handle. You give them a lane that they can succeed in. That is the real strategy. Give them a lane where they can come closer without feeling like they are stepping into court. A lane where they can show up without being interrogated. A lane where they can repair without being punished. A lane where they can build consistency without being forced into performance. Because here's the truth. Many avoidants want connection. They just do not want the cost of connection. They want closeness without obligation, intimacy without loss of self, love without exposure. So your job is not to beg for closeness. Your job is to restructure the cost. That is how you create return. Let me give you the core model. The avoidance system has 3 alarms. Alarm 1 is pressure. Pressure can be obvious, like repeated texts, double texts, asking where they stand, asking why they are distant, asking if they still care, asking for reassurance. Pressure can also be subtle, like emotional tone that says you are upset, disappointed, waiting. Alarm 2 is engulfment. Engulfment is not you being loving. Engulfment is you making them the center of your nervous system. When they feel you are orienting your day around their response, they feel trapped. Alarm 3 is shame. Shame is when they feel they are failing you, disappointing you, not being enough, not being a good partner, not being stable. Shame triggers withdrawal because withdrawal is control. If you understand these alarms, you can stop triggering them while still holding standards. And that is the key. People think the only way to stop triggering an avoidant is to accept less. That is false. The real way is to lower pressure while raising standards. Lower pressure means you stop pursuing and you stop emotional flooding. Raise standards means you stop rewarding inconsistency. This is how you get them back without returning to the same trap. Now, let's make this practical. If you go quiet and you keep checking, you keep hovering, you keep rereading messages, you keep waiting, you keep rehearsing, you are still feeding the attachment loop. That is energetic access. Avoidant systems can feel that you are still there. They may not call it that, but they can sense availability. So nothing changes. And then, when they reach out, you collapse and reward the return. That reward teaches them the exact wrong lesson. It teaches them that distance gives them power and return gives them relief. So they repeat the cycle. If you want the cycle to change, you reward staying, not return. You reward consistency, not attention. You reward repair, not apology. That is how you create a return that becomes real. And this connects directly to their worst fear. Their worst fear is being trapped in a relationship where they are constantly failing you and constantly being asked to prove love. When you become calm and firm, you remove the fear and you introduce clarity. Calm removes the pressure. Firm introduces consequence. Consequence is what makes patterns change, not speeches, not emotional trials. Consequence, meaning access is earned through behavior. So, what does calm and firm look like in real life? It looks like you stop chasing and you stop punishing. You stop sending long texts and you stop doing dramatic exits. You stop trying to win their emotions and you stop trying to scare them into choosing you. Instead, you become precise. You communicate in short, clean sentences. You keep your dignity. You do not argue about feelings. You observe behavior. You let their actions answer the question for you. And you respond to actions with your standards, not your anxiety. That is where their system begins to shift, because you stop feeding the alarms. Pressure drops, engulfment drops, shame drops. And when those alarms drop, something interesting happens. Avoidants begin to feel you again. They begin to remember you again. They begin to miss you again. Not because you manipulated them, but because your presence is no longer coded as threat. Now here's the part that makes people uncomfortable, but it is the truth. An avoidant will often come back when they feel they can come back without being punished and without being trapped. They do not come back to be shamed. They do not come back to be interrogated. They do not come back to sit through a court case of every silence and every delay. They come back when the emotional cost of return feels survivable. So the question becomes, how do you hold standards without punishment? The answer is structure. Structure means you do not demand closeness. You create conditions for closeness. You offer low-pressure connection points that are easy to accept, and you remove access when behavior is inconsistent. That is the entire game. It is not dramatic, it is not emotional, it is consistent. Most people lose leverage because they do not have a structure. They improvise based on feelings. They are warm one day, cold the next. They ignore 1 week, then send a paragraph. That inconsistency trains an avoidant to keep you in the cycle. If you want them back, you become the most consistent person in the room. Consistent does not mean constantly available. It means predictable in your standards, predictable in your self-respect, predictable in how you respond to behavior. Because avoidants crave stability, but only from a distance, at first. They want to feel you are stable without feeling you are closing in. So you become stable without closing in. You hold the line without grabbing. You keep your posture without pushing. And that is how you start changing their nervous system from the outside. Let's talk about their worst fear again, because this is the part that makes you magnetic if you understand it. Their worst fear is not losing you. Their worst fear is that if they come close, they will be consumed by expectation and then judged for failing. So when you chase, you are confirming their fear. When you send long emotional texts, you are confirming their fear. When you demand immediate reassurance, you are confirming their fear. When you punish them with silence as a performance, you are confirming their fear. Your goal is to remove confirmation, and you do that by becoming calm and firm. Calm says you are not trying to trap them. Firm says you are not willing to be trapped either. That combination is what makes them respect you. Now, let's go deeper, because you asked for the truth, and the truth is often the thing that makes your brain finally stop negotiating. Chemistry with an avoidant often feels like oxygen because of contrast. Closeness feels high because distance is high. Warmth feels intense because cold is intense. And your nervous system becomes trained to chase relief. When they pull away, your body activates. When they return, your body calms. That is why it feels like love even when it is destabilizing. It is relief. And relief is powerful. So if you want to create a return, you have to stop training your system to chase relief and start training your system to reward stability. This matters because avoidance can feel when you are chasing relief. It feels like hunger, and hunger triggers their fear. So you stabilize your own behavior. You stop acting at the peak. You let the peak pass. You stop sending the message at the height of anxiety. You stop making decisions at the height of longing. Because every time you do that, you reinforce the cycle. Every time you survive a peak without acting, you teach your system a new truth. I can feel this and still hold my frame. And that is what makes you more magnetic to an avoidant system over time. Because avoidants are drawn to steadiness. They are not drawn to please. They are not drawn to emotional flooding. They are drawn to the person who can stay calm without withdrawing into punishment. Now, let's get very tactical about what to do when they reach out, because this is where most people destroy the return. The avoidant reaches out, and the anxious side of you wants to turn it into a relationship meeting. You want to say, "Where have you been? Why did you disappear? Do you care? What are we?" That is pressure. Pressure triggers withdrawal. So instead, you treat the reach out like a bridge, not a courtroom. You respond warm and simple. You do not ignore. You do not punish. You respond with lightness and clarity. And then you do one crucial thing. You move the connection into something real, but low pressure. Not a long emotional call. Not an intense conversation at midnight. Something simple. A short meet. A walk. A coffee. A plan with a start and an end. Avoidants do better with defined containers. And if you cannot meet, you keep the exchange brief and you end it first, kindly. Because ending first signals sovereignty. It signals you are not waiting. That lowers their fear and increases their curiosity. Then, you watch behavior. If they show up consistently, you reward staying. You give more access. You give more time. You give more warmth. If they disappear again, you do not chase. You return to calm and firm. Calm means no emotional flooding. Firm means access does not remain open. You do not do endless back and forth. You do not do crumbs. Words without behavior do not count. When you accept that, your mind stops scanning for hidden meaning because you are no longer trying to solve their feelings. You are observing their pattern. And patterns become obvious when you stop feeding the signal economy. The signal economy is when your nervous system trades dignity for tiny signals. A like, a view, a short text, a one-word reply. That is the casino. You stop paying into it. And the moment you stop, two things happen. Your anxiety drops, and their system begins to notice the absence of pursuit. They notice the pressure is gone. At first, they feel relief. That is normal. Do not confuse relief with indifference. Relief is the nervous system exhaling. Then they notice the absence. Not emotionally at first, behaviorally. You are not initiating. You are not reacting. You are not available. That triggers a subtle anxiety because avoidance is not freedom. It is management. And when you stop participating, their management system loses a key piece. This is where their worst fear changes shape. At first, they fear being trapped. Then, they begin to fear losing access. They begin to wonder if they still have a place. They begin to wonder if you moved on. But they will not rush toward you like an anxious person. They will watch. They will hover. They will test the temperature. They will send a casual message. They will touch the edge of connection without committing. And this is where you win, if you are calm and firm. You respond without desperation. You receive without collapsing. You do not reward the return. You reward the staying. That is how you train the new pattern. Now let's talk about the silent treatment, because it sits right in the center of their worst fear. When an avoidant goes silent, it is usually not a strategy to hurt you. It is a strategy to regulate themselves. Silence is control. Silence is avoidance of shame. Silence is avoidance of obligation. Silence is avoidance of emotional confrontation. If you chase into their silence, you become the obligation. If you flood into their silence, you become the demand. If you threaten in their silence, you become the shame. So the move is cleaner silence on your side. Not longer, cleaner. Cleaner silence means you remove access across the board. No checking, no hovering, no indirect messages, no emotional fishing, no posting to be seen. You simply become still. And if you want them back, you make that stillness look like stability, not tantrum. That is the difference between silence that works and silence that backfires. Tantrum silence is loud. It has an energetic pull. It wants a reaction. Stable silence is quiet. It has an energetic boundary. It does not want a reaction. It is simply unavailable. That is what makes an avoidant feel safe enough to approach, because the approach does not come with the trap. And here is the part that sounds almost too simple, but it is true. When you can hold a standard without emotional pressure, you become the safest person in the room. Safe does not mean easy. It means predictable. It means you do not explode. It means you do not beg. It means you do not collapse. It means you do not punish. You simply respond to behavior with access. And this is where their worst fear begins to dissolve. Because the fear is not closeness. The fear is chaotic closeness. The fear is closeness where they are constantly in trouble. The fear is closeness where they must perform reassurance every time your anxiety spikes. When you become stable, you remove that fear. And when you remove that fear, you give their real feelings space to appear. Now, I know what you actually want. You want to know how to get them back without losing your dignity. Let me summarize the core moves in a way that your nervous system can follow. 1. Stop feeding the alarms. No pressure, no emotional flooding, no interrogation, no long emotional texts. 2. Hold standards through access, not speeches. Words without behavior do not count. 3. Use clean silence, not performative silence. Clean silence removes energetic access. It does not announce pain. 4. If they return, meet the return with calm, not relief. Reward staying, not return. 5. Move connection into low-pressure containers where they can succeed. Short plans, defined time, no relationship courtroom. Do those 5 things consistently, and you create the 2 conditions that reliably shift an avoidance system over time: consequence and safety. Consequence means inconsistency costs them access. Safety means, if they come closer, they will not be humiliated, controlled, or devoured. Most people fail because they only do one. They create consequence with coldness, and the avoidant runs. Or they create safety with endless understanding, and the avoidant relaxes into distance. You need both: calm and firm, warm and boundaried, stable and self-respecting. That is what changes an avoidance nervous system from the outside. And that is what creates the kind of return that does not collapse back into the same cycle. And if you take one final truth from this, take this: the avoidant's worst fear is not losing you. Their worst fear is that being close will cost them their autonomy and expose them to shame. So the person who wins is not the person who loves the hardest. The person who wins is the person who makes closeness feel safe, clear, and earned. Welcome to PsychBond. You're safe here.